This is the one you had on the fuel poverty. And,
yes.
Okay. Do we no longer need to reduce fuel poverty and carbon emissions? Is the next question related to this. So, Molly, would you like to?
Sorry, the background to that is that the eco scheme has today been watered down, so the companies have now got another 2 years to retrofit the same number of houses, as I understand.
I think you've got to ask yourself, how successful is the scheme going to be when basically you give the responsibility for reducing demand for something to the people who make their profit from that thing? That's the essential problem with the design of the ecosystem, right? You say to energy companies, well, you're responsible for making sure people use less energy, but their profits rely on people using more energy. That's never going to work. And beyond that, I would say that the market for energy doesn't work either. In fact, it's generally agreed that the market for energy doesn't work. But I think that's also inevitably the case. Energy is absolutely crucial in terms of climate change. It's also crucial to all of our well-being. And we've seen sort of 30 years now where there's been a sort of dogmatic ideological position that the government should not take a role in energy. This is such a mistake. We haven't had the investment we need over that time. We haven't had strategic planning. Just because there's an ideological sense it's better to have things in the market. It isn't better. We're all paying far too much for our energy. We don't have security of supply, and we haven't addressed the problem of climate change. This is where the role for government is absolutely crucial, and Labour and Conservative have both completely failed it. ECHO's just one part of that failure, I think. And now having this kind of phony war between Labour and Tories over who would be able to sort out the market failure. But it's all misguided because we shouldn't have energy in the markets anyway. Essentially, the companies are just having a laugh. They're running a sort of informal cartel, and we're paying the price for that. And in terms of fuel poverty, there were 9,300 excess winter deaths last year, and that was up 29% from the year before. And in a rich society like this, I think we should be completely ashamed of that. It shows more than anything that our energy policy is utterly failed.
I think it's important we do talk about fuel poverty because we've seen, certainly in the middle part of the last decade, we saw an alarming spike in fuel poverty. Nearly 3 million extra people entered that classification between the 5 years. There was then some improvement, which was welcome. But I still think it's wrong that meter payments are more expensive than direct debits. I don't think it's right. I don't think it's fair. I think that those tariffs need to be cheaper. They need to be fair. They need to respect and reflect the fact that people who are using meters are often in the most tough and challenging circumstances. However, again, to debate with Molly, the energy market has never been a free market. It is the most regulated and government-controlled market of them all. I mean, I just sat on the energy bill when it went through the House of Commons, and you know, if I didn't know before, I certainly know now the myriad of different mechanisms that are used in order to try and make sure that there is a stable basis for future investment into energy. And that's replicated right across Europe. I mean, there are 27 different mechanisms that governments within the EU use. I mean, I'd much rather see a single market in energy so that there was much more of an integration of our energy supply across Europe. However, Molly and I will agree about the failure to address the issue of security of supply. And I think that's one issue that can actually unite those people who want to live in the dark ages and deny the fact that human activity affects climate, and those of us, me included, who believe that it's axiomatic that human activity affects the climate. And that phrase is energy security. And I think energy security and making sure that we can go back to a position where, and we used to be able to do this, where we exported energy to other parts of the world, would be a far preferable place to be than the rather exposed situation in which we find ourselves now. I think that if we answer that question of security of supply, we can then really come up with a long-term solution to dealing with fuel poverty. Because I do think, and again I agree with Molly on this, that the phony debate that we're having about current fuel bills goes nowhere to answer the question, the long-term questions about the cost of energy, the cost of fuel. The idea that through a little adjustment here or a freeze there, that we can solve the problem for households and businesses is just laughable. These are long-term problems requiring long-term solutions, which is why I'm a strong believer in ensuring that the investment that is waiting out there in terms of renewables is something that we get in and get in quickly to the UK, which is why, although the energy bill is far from perfect, I'm not pretending it is a perfect mechanism, it does now, for the first time in a number of years, provide some stability for that sort of investment. I want to see that bill passed, I want to see the strike prices set, and I want to see that investment starting to come into the UK. And I'll end on this note. The problem with the phony war about bills is that it is detracting and potentially undermining that investment, and that's what worries me.
I have to agree about that.
I just make a comment here as chair of the Swindon People's Forum. We've recently had a meeting about what the issues and concerns are for that particular age sector, and fuel poverty is right up there at the top. There are people of that age are really fearsome about the winter and how they're going to pay their bills. So it's something which is a very live thing, but for that particular age sector, I dare say they aren't alone in that. Gary or Dan, do you want to say anything in relation to fuel poverty, carbon emissions?
Well, I'll try and be brief. As I suspect you will imagine, I think that one of the solutions to tackling security of supply is to localise it. And in Wiltshire, for example, I don't know if this is true for the borough, but in Wiltshire, the schools, their heating systems have been dependent pretty much on oil. And they have a programme now of replacing the oil boiler system with biofuel. And the benefit of that is they have an independence of supply, but also it's stimulating the local economy and helping biodiversity at the same time in terms of generating a use for wood products. So it's good for wildlife, it's good for the schools, it's good for the climate. So that's an example locally, and that's about localising that supply. On fuel poverty, I think it's absolutely scandalous the situation we are in, that we are such a wealthy nation. I think we are the 6th wealthiest economy in the world still, and yet we still have people dying. And when you see the examples of people struggling to warm their incredibly inefficient homes, it actually breaks your heart. For 10 years, the Wiltshire Wildlife Trust was the home energy efficiency advisory service for Wiltshire and Swindon. We were funded to try to work with people in fuel poverty, people who wanted to learn about energy efficiency measures, insulation and so on. We had a small grant fund that we were able to, for people in particular needs, to actually go in, and one of the greatest things I was able to do was sign the cheque to pay for plumbers to go into people's houses and actually replace their incredibly inefficient systems. And at the same time, people would say, why is the Wildlife Trust doing that? Because we reduce the carbon footprint by doing it as well. And we all know, I don't suppose there's anybody in this room who doesn't believe in climate change. So I could go on about climate change and its importance and why it is actually the single greatest threat that we all face, not just to the environment, but actually to humanity as a whole. We are polluting the planet and we are reaping the consequences, and we need to address that. And efficiency of use of energy is one of the things that we have to tackle. And so means to do that, I think, are really important.
Thank you.
So on security of supply, I entirely agree with what's been said so far. It is about localisation and actually having a distributed energy system. So each towns and cities around the country will be more self-sufficient in that part. The biggest problem is actually down to grid capacity and the fact that private lines simply aren't existed. So you can't actually have these kind of large-scale things, which is why the council is talking to the power companies, distribution companies, to try and sort out how in Swindon, if we've got the aim to deliver 100% renewable to residential houses, how can we actually work with the energy companies to deliver that? It isn't about one person or one company, or we have to do this collectively, and we have to much more strategic level than we are. But going on to fuel poverty, actually it's the opposite end of the spectrum. I do not think a single law or a single structural thing you try with energy companies or the government will help a single person. It is about how you target the help and assistance that is available, so you can actually work and identify people who are in fuel poverty and who really do need the assistance. How do we work with the Other People's Forum and other groups, and you yourselves, as who are your neighbours who might be in the same kind of situation? How do we identify the people who really are vulnerable in, say, Freshborough, or in Covington, where I represent, or in Nye, or in Old Town? How do we actually identify those people and help them out on an individual basis? I think that's where we all kind of collectively have to get together, and it is down to funding, which will come from the government and the energy companies, and obviously our bills. But actually, that's the level we need to be thinking about, is practical action on the ground to target assistance to tackle fuel poverty. I don't believe at all, and it is a very phony war, even talking about fuel poverty the way it does it in the national context. They kind of band around the big parties, and even the small parties do the same kind of thing. I actually think that's the wrong way to tackle it. So that's where I stand.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
Yes, Gary.
just briefly come back as an example, creative thinking. One of the things you ask, how do you do it? I don't think actually there's a huge problem in identifying the people who actually need and would benefit from improving the efficiency of the heating in their homes, improving energy conservation in their homes. The question is, how do you do it? How do you pay for it? Well, we have got a massive unemployment problem with young people. We could, at a stroke, use the skills and the talent and the energy of young people, particularly engaging where you've got older people who are vulnerable and fearful, and to bring those two things together. It takes a bit of creative thinking, it will create some money, but there's a fantastic opportunity, and it can be done incredibly quickly, much more quickly than some of the big structural changes that we talked about. Very simple, but it will then immediately benefit those most in need.
Before we stay on energy, before we move on, are there any points of the floor that want to be made on the response that we just heard?
Maybe on just that very last point that Gary made. I mean, we have, I think, approximately 360 18-year-olds from Swindon who are not in education, employment or training. And I would suggest that maybe that is in itself a starting point. We use the word creativity.
Jerry at the back, did you want to say something?
Is a general point and a question. If one thinks about a long-term approach, energy security, some sort of coherent energy supply portfolio, how do you do that in a free market? Because you need to line out a bit of fossil, a bit of gas, a bit of coal, a bit of solar, a bit of wind, a bit of tidal. Who would coordinate that approach? I hope this happened. And the question is, does anybody know why on an island, tidal, just there's no traction? Why does tidal on an island, why does tidal not get a mention?